This year has been hard for many reasons. Around the world, more than 1 million people have died as a result of the coronavirus pandemic, and it's rising every day. And tens of millions more have been directly affected. And as a result of this crisis, many people have lost jobs, and they're struggling to rebuild their lives as the ongoing economic and social fallout continues. This year, many regions, including the one where we're based, have been impacted by natural disasters. Protests have swept around the world in response to police brutality. And here in the US, the run-up to today's general election has pitted one citizen against another. Stress is high. And to be honest, there have been many days where it has been difficult for everybody to cope. Pretty much everyone I know has been feeling the effects of this ongoing tension and pain. And if you've been finding yourself struggling over the past few months, know that you are not alone. We are all here together. So today, as a way of distraction from, we're going to look back at something a little happier, namely how far we've come in the electric vehicle world in the last decade that plug-in cars have been readily available. In the late 2000s, the only serious electric vehicle for sale, at least brand new, was the first generation Tesla Roadster. The Roadster was a revolutionary vehicle, and it showed both members of the public and automakers that electric vehicles, when manufactured with competitive intent, could hold their own against petrol cars in their segment. While the Roadster was a fantastic vehicle, it was anything but an affordable, family-friendly daily driver. But it did open the door for electric vehicles of that description to be produced. By late 2010, almost 10 years ago, Nissan and General Motors effectively walked through that door when they launched their first mass-market plug-ins. One was a fully electric car, the Nissan Leaf. One was a range-extended plug-in hybrid, the Chevrolet Volt. And, lest we not forget it, Mitsubishi also began selling its iMEV electric car in select markets around the world, having launched it in 2009 in select, lease-only test programs. Cars like the Nissan Leaf were a pretty big deal, because their introduction allowed for a large number of customers to finally get their hands on an affordable EV. At the time, many people, even in big cities, had never seen an electric car and possibly had only heard about the Tesla Roadster. Nissan, on the other hand, had been a massive automaker for years. It had brand recognition, and people began noticing the Leaf on the road and in dealerships around the world. But while the Leaf was early to market, it didn't meet everyone's needs. The car received a mere 73 miles of range from the EPA, which kept the Nissan Leaf firmly in niche car territory. Many buyers were also turned off by the prospect of buying into said new technology. Although the Leaf did show that electric powertrains were not just for the super wealthy, there were other issues. Nissan was selling the cars in the low $30,000 range. But after incentives, customers were spending as little as $25,000 in their new cars. I've been covering the electric car world for several years by that point, and I can't stress how amazing it felt to see a more affordable car on the road that just happened to be electric. I even got the chance to test drive a prototype Leaf test mule a good number of months before it launched. Alright, so here we go. Test drive, very quick test drive of the Mule. So first of all, it creeps like a regular automatic and the acceleration is pretty instantaneous. In fact, last time I managed to get some wheel spin and there we have it. Braking is not regen on this vehicle, but obviously the production model is going to have some. It's very, very tight, nippy. It just feels responsive all the way around this test track. And quite frankly, I'm pushing it quite hard. And Lee had a little bit of wheel spin there. Brilliant car, love it to bits. By late 2012, early 2013, two distinct worlds began emerging in the electric vehicle space. On one side, you had Tesla coming out with the Model S long-range luxury sedan, whereas on the other side, you had many legacy automakers coming out with low-range, semi-affordable compliance cars to satisfy regional mandates. Some of those compliance cars did end up being rather good, but many were, shall we say, half-assed? The main point is this. Being a 100% electric vehicle company, Tesla wasn't mucking around with compliance cars and old battery tech. Because it was positioned in the luxury segment and it could charge more, it was building good cars and innovating. At the launch, Model S could go a staggering 236 miles on a charge if you bought the 85 kilowatt-hour battery pack version, which blew the Nissan Leaf right out of the water. Admittedly, the Leaf and Model S were for drastically different markets. The original Tesla Model S 85, which wasn't the lowest range version but the most popular, cost $78,000, which is just a little bit more than the Leaf's $32,780 sticker price. But in the following years, this dichotomy progressed. Tesla came out with its Model X, and Nissan and other automakers continued to offer upgraded vehicles, including the Renault Zoe. More of these companies came out with mid-range electric cars. Sometimes they had optional quick charging, but even then, they mostly all sat around the 100-mile range per charge mark. It wasn't really until the 2017 model year that a watershed moment occurred, when competing affordable long-range EVs began entering into the market, and existing models got batteries large enough to offer decent performance. The Chevrolet Bolt and the Tesla Model 3 spearheaded this. The first to hit the road was the Bolt. It could achieve a range of 238 miles, and it started at a price of about $37,000 before incentives. In the US, it was a big deal because it made the Bolt the first mass-market long-range EV to be sold at a non-premium price point. While it is not for everyone, the Bolt has earned itself a reputation as a bit of an underdog in the electric car market, but it does deliver on range and drivability. Doug DeMuro once called it the uncool electric car, and longtime viewers of this channel will know that I still drive one every day. The Bolt sold reasonably well. According to GM Authority, Chevy shifted about 20,000 units per year in the US alone. But it could easily be argued that Chevy could have achieved much better sales figures if it actually tried to sell the car, got more engagement from dealerships, or even made some basic consumer-oriented design choices like including power seats. At the end of the day, while the Bolt in many ways was a pretty good vehicle, it never came close to the production numbers of its rival, the Tesla Model 3, for obvious reasons. When the Tesla Model 3 was unveiled, there was an unheard of fanfare. It had a glass roof, minimalist interior, and impressive tech, and it managed to rack up hundreds of thousands of deposits well over a year before it actually entered into volume production. Many of these pre-orders were won in part by promising a $35,000 price tag variant. While selling, or rather getting deposits online for a new car, wasn't actually a new thing, Tesla Model 3 set new records for this form of vehicle rollout at the time. And when Model 3 deliveries began, there were some tweaks to original specification and pricing, again unheard of. Specs were better than promised, 310 miles, and Tesla did increase the base price to $44,000. Even though the original price was higher than promised, those order books became backlogged by hundreds of thousands of eager buyers who could not wait to get their hands on a Model 3. Tesla did eventually offer a $35,000 variant of the Model 3, but there were enough customers who were willing to hand over the extra cash for more premium features, and so Tesla ultimately pulled the listing from the standard range Model 3 on its website. Side note, while Tesla still technically offers the standard range Model 3 as a phone-in only option, it's unclear if Tesla will continue to offer that $35,000 option moving forwards. Our researcher Morgan actually called Tesla to try and find out, and the answer he got was pretty vague. Following the wildly successful launch of Model 3, the rest of the auto industry really began to realise what was going on, and knew that they either had to come along for the ride or miss out. Many automakers from all over the world started launching their first official standalone electric models. These include the Jaguar I-Pace, Audi e-tron, and Porsche Taycan. The reasons for bringing these cars to market were complex. Some automakers clearly had their sights on beating Tesla, we know how that went, and others seemed more intent on making sure they didn't fall foul of increasingly tough emissions regulations around the world. But during this time, many legacy automakers started making electric versions of their existing petrol models or developing cars that could be sold with various different drivetrains. The e-Niro and Soul EVs, as well as the Honda Clarity Electric, all fit into this category. At this point, I think it's also important to note that legacy automakers, most at least, take anywhere from between 2 and 5 years to actually bring a car to market, from initial sketches to vehicles rolling off the production line. Chevrolet famously managed to achieve its Bolt development in a little over a year, but many of the cars that started to appear in 2017 through to today have been in development for a lot longer, and some of them maybe even had their development processes started before Tesla began Model 3 and Model Y production, but after Model S and Model X production, which shows that Tesla lit a fire under their bums. Apart from existing automakers, several new players onto the scene announced electric vehicles of their own. And I say new because most of them had been operating in stealth for a while. Rivian unveiled its R1T pickup and R1S SUV, and Lucid started to tease the Lucid Air sedan. Slowly but more surely, more and more automakers began announcing or even launching electric vehicles, and by the start of 2020, almost every car company on the planet had either launched or unveiled some form of electric vehicle. But while many other automakers were launching increasingly compelling new EVs, Tesla has continued to move the goalposts. Earlier this year, it threw down the gauntlet when it began production of Model Y. This impressive crossover is not only capable of travelling a decent distance, 326 miles per charge, and boasts some impressive performance specs, but it's made using innovative technology. The competition has been set, and now the coming years look to be extremely exciting for the electric vehicle world, if only to see others try and play catch-up. I've already talked a little bit about range, but range is not a very good way to measure the progress in the EV space. This is because we could theoretically always build a long-range EV if we're just willing to add more batteries to existing vehicles. In order to take a better look at how technology has changed over time, though, we need to look at three other important metrics: cost per kilowatt hour, which is the actual cost of battery manufacturing per unit of energy storage, watt hours per mile, which is a measure of electric efficiency, and watt hours per kilogram, which is a measure of energy density. Let's start by looking at the cost per kilowatt hour. This metric is important for one major critical reason. The cheaper it is to produce each kilowatt hour of battery storage capacity, the larger the battery pack that can be fitted to a vehicle without adjusting its price. Conversely, if a manufacturer wants to keep the same capacity vehicle battery inside of their cars, but drops the kilowatt hour price, then that vehicle price can be lowered as well. When we talk about the cost per kilowatt hour, there are two valid ways of computing it. The first is to evaluate the cost per kilowatt hour at the point of manufacturing, which shows how much the automaker is actually paying per kilowatt hour of each battery pack that's installed. The other method is to look at the point of vehicle purchase. By dividing the price of a vehicle by the capacity of its battery pack, you can pretty much compare how much the buyer is paying per unit of possible energy capacity. And while it's not exact, it's quite a useful metric when comparing values of different EVs. Looking first at the point of manufacturing, according to Bloomberg NEF in 2019, battery prices have plummeted over the last decade. Bloomberg actually found that between 2010 and 2019, battery prices dropped from around $1,100 per kilowatt hour to just $156 per kilowatt hour. This is a massive drop and shows amazing progress across the EV industry. For context, these numbers indicate that if Tesla had tried to make a 100 kilowatt hour Roadster in 2010, the battery pack alone would have cost $110,000. But after 10 short years of battery development, that same battery pack in 2019 would have cost just $15,600, although Tesla likely pays less. Technological improvements like this are good for both automakers and customers because it increases profits for the company while lowering the end cost to the consumer. And these theoretical cost savings to the consumer have been realized. Looking at our second method of determining the cost per kilowatt hour to the customer, that is, the price of the vehicle divided by the capacity of the battery pack, we can see that prices have fallen over the past decade. Remember that original Nissan Leaf from 2010? It started at $32,780 and came with a 24 kilowatt hour nominal battery pack. Doing the maths, that comes to $1,365 per kilowatt hour for the customer. Now, if we compare this to the 2020 Nissan Leaf, which starts at $31,600 and comes with a 40 kilowatt hour battery pack, This means that the 2020 model year costs just $760 per kilowatt hour. Over just 10 years, the base Nissan Leaf has almost doubled its battery capacity while dropping slightly in price. Nissan is not alone in taking advantage of the economic benefits that new batteries have offered. However, the Leaf serves as the best example of this trend because it's been marketed in the same price range and in roughly the same form for an entire decade. Next, let's talk about energy density. Energy density is a phrase that's sometimes used interchangeably to describe two different things. There's energy per unit mass, otherwise known as specific energy density, and energy per unit volume, aka volumetric energy density. These are both actually critical metrics because they determine the weight and size of a battery pack necessary to contain a specific amount of energy. The higher the energy density, the better, and luckily it's been improving quickly. Speaking at the 2020 Bloomberg NEF Summit, Bloomberg NEF's head of advanced transport, that's Colin McCratcher, said, quote, "Battery energy densities keep getting better. They've almost tripled over the past 10 years. This improvement in specific energy density has a large impact on the auto industry. In many ways, it was those breakthroughs in energy density that allowed for all of these new electric cars to come to market without being incredibly expensive. Improvements in cell chemistry have increased the range of existing vehicles as well. Looking again at that Nissan Leaf between 2010 and 2017, there were a few different model years between that, Nissan improved the Leaf's battery pack from containing 24 kilowatt hours of energy to containing 40 kilowatt hours of energy. This upgrade was made partly possible by improvements in its battery technology. Finally, we should talk about energy efficiency. Whenever we talk about this in this context, what we're really referring to is the number of miles that a vehicle can travel from a set amount of energy. In the industry, you'll usually see this measured in one of two ways: miles per kilowatt hour, or kilowatt hours per kilometre, or more commonly, watt hours per mile. We're going to use the latter metric for the purposes of this video, and before we delve in, note that 1 kilowatt hour is equal to 1,000 watt hours, in case you didn't know. So if you do prefer to think about efficiency in terms of miles per kilowatt hour, that conversion is that 200 watt hours per mile would be equivalent to 5 miles per kilowatt hour. We can find watt hours per mile by dividing the vehicle's usable battery capacity in watt hours by the range the vehicle has in miles. But unfortunately, some automakers are a little cagey about what their actual usable capacity of their batteries are, including Tesla. So we're going to have to stick with published efficiency figures here. The original Nissan Leaf was rated at 99 mpge, which is equivalent to an efficiency rating of about 340 watt hours per mile. The base 2020 model of the Nissan Leaf is rated at 111 miles per gallon equivalent. This means that the new Leaf only uses about 304 watt hours per mile, which is an 11% improvement over 10 years. Nissan is far, though, from the only brand to improve its vehicle efficiency over time. Tesla has done it too, in a far larger way. When it first launched in 2012, the original Model S 85 was given an efficiency rating of 89 miles per gallon equivalent. Tesla's dramatically improved this figure, and today the Model S Long Range Plus now boasts a rating of 117 miles per gallon equivalent. This is an improvement in efficiency from 379 to 288 watt hours per mile. If we track both the Model S and Leaf's improvements to help give an idea of the pace of progress in the industry, I should tell you that these vehicles are by far not the most efficient EVs on the road today. That goes to the Tesla Model 3 Standard Range Plus, which sits alone at the top of the Department of Energy's efficiency listings by getting an impressive combined efficiency of 141 miles per gallon equivalent, which means that the Model 3 uses about 240 watt hours of energy per mile travelled. It might not feel like it today, but innovation has been progressing very quickly over the past decade, and frankly, it shows no sign of slowing down. And at its recent battery day, Tesla announced its plans to further bring down the cost of batteries. And it is far from the only company working on this endeavour. In the next few years, battery costs will continue to fall, efficiencies will continue to improve, and more new EVs will enter the market. And that's super exciting. That's it. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you next time.